All right, let's get into today's deep dive. And wow, uh, are we ever tackling a wild one today?
Yeah, you could say that.
I mean, the al-Assad regime in Syria just gone like that. Who saw that coming? Seriously.
Yeah. Y-
Especially in just 12 days.
12 days. Can you believe that?
It's nuts. We're going deep on this using a recent Al Jazeera article that breaks down everything.
All the events, and more importantly, I think the impact.
It's huge, right? Like the whole Middle East just got flipped on its head.
Absolutely. We're looking at a complete reshuffling of power, that's for sure.
So to really grasp just how big this is, we have to rewind a bit, right?
Sure, sure.
Syria wasn't just floating out there alone. They were deeply entangled with some major players, especially Russia and Iran.
Yeah, and these weren't just casual friendships. We're talking deep historical ties.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Starting with Russia, the relationship with Syria that goes way back.
Way back, think Cold War, when Syria was a crucial Soviet ally.
So like their foothold in the Middle East.
Exactly. A way to counter the West during that whole standoff.
Makes sense. And even after the Soviet Union collapsed, those ties stayed strong.
Oh, they did. Big time. Think about it. Syria was the first Arab nation to buy Soviet weapons.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that military cooperation, it just kept going, even after the Cold War ended.
So it was more than just weapons. It was a whole strategic partnership,
Totally. And a public one, too.
like a signal to the world, we're tight with Russia.
Exactly. In 2004, Bashar al-Assad, the president who's just been ousted, he went to Moscow himself.
Really, to reinforce that bond.
Oh, yeah, it was a clear message, especially for anyone thinking of messing with Syria.
We got Russia behind us.
Exactly. It was about projecting strength and, yeah, maintaining that grip on power.
Okay, so we've got Russia. Now let's bring Iran into the mix. How'd they get so close to Syria?
Well, that one really solidified around 1979, funny enough, because they both really disliked Saddam Hussein.
Oh, interesting. A common enemy situation.
Exactly. They saw Saddam as a threat to both of them, and it forged a strong bond between them.
And then I'm guessing the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003 didn't exactly help things.
No, not at all. Both Iran and Syria were wary of the U.S. getting too influential in the region.
So they had to stick together.
A united front, that's right. And this is where you start hearing about the Shia Crescent.
Shiite Crescent. Now, I've heard that term, but what does it actually mean?
Picture a crescent shape on the map, starting in western Afghanistan and going through Iran, Iraq, right into Syria, all the way to the Mediterranean.
Wow. Okay, I see it.
Both Iran and Syria were essential to this idea. Think of it as a counterweight to U.S. power in the Middle East.
So like a way to project their own power.
And influence. Yes, and this is important because by the time the Arab Spring uprising started in 2011, Iran was totally invested in keeping Syria stable.
They had skin in the game for sure.
Oh yeah, big time. They saw the Arab Spring as a direct threat, and they weren't wrong.
Domino effect, right?
Exactly. One pro-Western government replacing another, and their whole position crumbles.
And Syria was a key part of that Shia Crescent. So losing Syria would have been a disaster for them.
A huge blow, no question. So they did everything they could to back al-Assad.
I mean, they didn't just sit on the sidelines and watch, did they?
Not even close. They sent in fighters, including Hezbollah from Lebanon, to bolster al-Assad's forces.
Wow, serious commitment.
They were pouring billions into the regime, keeping it afloat, essentially fighting a proxy war through Syria.
Now, what about Russia at this point? Were they actively involved too?
Not in the same way, not initially. Iran was really the main backer in those first years of the conflict.
Okay, so Iran's holding the line, but then things get even worse for al-Assad around 2015, right?
Right. His grip on power is slipping, and Iran realizes they need more muscle.
So they call in the big guns, Russia.
Exactly. And that's when things really shift. 2015, Russia enters the scene, and it changes everything.
I mean, it wasn't just about helping a buddy out for Russia, right? This was about their own ambitions.
Oh, absolutely. This was a strategic play for Russia, a chance to reassert themselves in the Middle East.
To stick it to the U.S. a bit.
Yeah, and to show there's still a global force to be reckoned with.
And their air power especially was crucial, right? Turned the tide for al-Assad.
Totally. Brutal but effective, helped him take back territory, crushed the opposition's momentum.
Gave Russia a strong foothold, literally, with bases popping up.
And it shifted the diplomatic game, too. They were calling more of the shots.
So Russia's in, Iran's all in. Meanwhile, support for the Syrian opposition is drying up, especially from the West.
True. And, the conflict got so messy, it's hard to blame them.
It's hard to keep up with who's who. The lines blurred between moderate rebels and extremists.
And the West got wary. War fatigue was setting in. People were tired of seeing another endless Middle East conflict.
Plus, al-Assad was pretty good at spinning the narrative, it's me or the terrorists kind of thing.
Yeah, he played that angle well, made it tough for the West to justify supporting the other side.
And we got to talk about Turkey. Their role in all this was fascinating.
Yeah, they went through quite a shift. Initially, they were backing the Syrian opposition.
But as things dragged on, their stance changed, didn't it?
It did. They had this tough balancing act, sharing a border with Syria, dealing with tons of refugees.
But also trying to stay cool with both Russia and the U.S.
Right, real politic in action. And then in 2017, boom, they joined the Astana format.
What's that, for those who don't know?
It was a Russian initiative, basically bringing Russia, Iran, and Turkey together to try to hash out a political solution.
So basically, Turkey aligns with Russia and Iran, further isolating the Syrian opposition.
Pretty much, yeah. It showed where their priorities were at that point.
Their own interests, first and foremost.
Yeah, pragmatism over idealism.
By 2024, it seemed like a fragile peace had settled in. Al-Assad's back, propped up by Russia and Iran.
Yeah, the opposition was scattered and demoralized, and the West seemed content to let things simmer.
Stalemate, but a tense one.
Definitely undercurrents of tension, everyone just waiting for the right moment to make a move.
And then, bam, this surprise offensive comes out of nowhere.
Wipes through the country. Just 12 days later, al-Assad regime gone.
I mean, talk about a geopolitical earthquake. Nobody predicted this, did they?
Not a chance. Russia and Iran especially, they totally misjudged the situation.
Big-time intelligence failure.
Underestimated the opposition, overestimated the regime's resilience, major blunder.
Okay, so let's start unpacking the consequences. Iran has to be reeling from this.
Huge setback for them, no doubt. They've lost a key ally, a piece of their Shiite Crescent. Their ability to project power takes a hit.
And what about that land corridor through Syria? You know, the one they used to supply Hezbollah.
That's severed now, so they've got a logistical headache on their hands.
So where does this leave Iran? Do they pull back, lick their wounds, or do they get even more aggressive?
That's the million-dollar question. Do they go pragmatic or do they double down? Maybe even ramp up their nuclear program.
Oh, that's a scary thought.
It's a pivotal moment for them. Their next move will shape the entire region.
And what about Russia? This has got to be a massive embarrassment for Putin after all that investment in al-Assad.
Oh yeah, it dents their image, makes them look less reliable, less in control than they projected.
But they still have military bases in Syria, right? Do they stay or do they pack up and go home?
Tough call. They're in a precarious spot now. Without al-Assad, their legitimacy is weaker.
And Turkey's looking pretty strong right now.
Right, they could clash with Turkey, who's emerging as the new power player in the region.
Speaking of Turkey, they basically outsmarted both Russia and Iran. They're sitting pretty now, aren't they?
Kingmakers, that's what they are, controlling that crucial corridor linking Europe and the Gulf.
Huge leverage over everyone involved. Wow, how things can change.
Geopolitics, it's a wild ride.
It's interesting to see the reaction from the U.S. and the EU. They seem pretty happy about al-Assad being gone.
Cautious optimism, I'd say. They see this as a potential win, a setback for Russia and Iran.
Maybe a chance to ease the Syrian refugee crisis.
Possibly, but they're also wary of getting sucked into another messy conflict.
And then there's Israel. Their reaction is all over the place. Glad to see the Iran-led alliance weakened.
But nervous about what might come next.
A new government in Damascus might be more friendly to the Palestinians, not something they want to see.
Yeah, they're in a wait-and-see mode, assessing the risks and opportunities.
But they're not sitting idly by, are they? Those airstrikes on Syrian arms depots tell a different story.
No, they're not taking any chances. Preemptive action, sending a clear message.
Don't even think about messing with us.
Exactly. It's a whole new ball game now. Alliances broken, power dynamics shifting.
It's like a geopolitical Jenga tower. Someone pulled out a key block, and now everything's wobbling.
Who knows which way it'll fall next.
And we're just beginning to see the aftershocks of this massive event.
Yeah, it really highlights how volatile things are, how quickly things can change.
Even seemingly rock-solid regimes.
Gone in a flash, it makes you wonder what other assumptions we're holding on to that might be proven wrong.
That's a thought-provoking question for sure.
And one we need to keep in mind as we navigate this new landscape.
All right, well, that's a fascinating start to our deep dive. We've got a lot more to unpack, so stay with us.
We'll be back to explore the ripple effects of this event, the impact on the region and the world.
Don't go anywhere.
Yeah, it really is. You know, it makes you think all those alliances, all those years of what seemed like unbreakable power.
And then boom, gone.
It's a powerful reminder of how volatile things are out there.
Absolutely. And it's easy to get caught up in the geopolitical game, but we can't forget about the human cost.
Oh, absolutely. The Syrian people have been through so much. It's heartbreaking.
The Al Jazeera article we're looking at, it mentions over 350,000 Syrians have lost their lives in this conflict.
And 13 million displaced? Think about that. 13 million.
Hard to even fathom those
A
numbers.
humanitarian crisis on a scale that's it's staggering.
And now, with this sudden shift, I wonder what's going through their minds.
I mean, for many, it has to be a mix of relief and apprehension, right?
Like, finally, al-Assad's gone, but what now?
They've endured so much. Oppression, war, unimaginable hardship. And now they face the daunting task of rebuilding.
Rebuilding a nation, and not just physically, right?
No, the psychological scars run deep. Rebuilding trust, institutions, a sense of normalcy after all that trauma.
Where do you even begin?
That's where the international community has a huge role to play, providing aid, support, not just for immediate relief, but for long-term recovery.
It can't be a quick fix. It has to be about addressing the root causes, creating a system that's actually just and equitable.
Giving everyone a voice, a chance to thrive, that's the real challenge.
Absolutely, and a big part of that is going to be the formation of a new government, isn't it?
Huge question mark there. Will it be inclusive, representative of the diverse Syrian population?
Or will it just be another flavor of authoritarianism?
We've seen that happen before. Unfortunately, the cycle repeating itself.
It's the age-old question. How do you transition from dictatorship to democracy without falling back into old patterns?
And the world's watching. How will the international community respond? Will they support a genuine transition or just sit back and see what happens?
Lots of uncertainty. But one thing's clear, the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East has been totally reshaped.
It's like a seismic shift. And we've talked about the major players, Russia, Iran, Turkey. But what about the smaller countries in the region?
Yeah, what about them? They must be watching this whole thing unfold with a mix of fascination and fear.
Exactly. Countries like Jordan, Lebanon, the Gulf states, they're all trying to figure out where they stand in this new reality.
Some must be seeing opportunities, right?
Mm-hmm.
To gain influence, forge new alliances.
But others are probably more worried about the instability, the potential for things to spiral out of control.
And what about non-state actors? Groups like Hezbollah, ISIS, even al-Qaeda? Could they exploit this chaos?
It's a valid concern. Those groups thrive in environments like this, where there's a power vacuum.
So even though they were largely defeated during the previous conflict, we could see a resurgence.
It's not out of the question, unfortunately, and that would just add another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation.
Okay, so we've got regional implications, but let's zoom out a bit and think about the global impact.
Okay, yeah.
Syria might not be a major oil producer, but it's in a strategically important region. Could this upheaval affect energy markets?
It's definitely something to keep an eye on. Any instability in the Middle East can send ripples through global energy markets.
Especially now when everyone's so concerned about energy security, any disruption could have a domino effect.
Absolutely. And if the conflict were to spill over into neighboring countries or affect shipping lanes, the global economy could take a hit.
It's all interconnected. What happens in Syria can affect everyone, no matter how far away they seem.
We can't isolate these events. The world's too interconnected for that.
And what about the refugee crisis? Millions of Syrians have already fled. Could this new instability trigger another wave of migration?
I hate to say it, but it's a real possibility, and it would put immense pressure on countries that are already struggling to cope with the influx of refugees.
Europe especially. They've been bearing the brunt of it.
It would strain their resources, their social fabric, and for the refugees themselves, it would be another layer of hardship on top of everything they've already endured.
They've lost their homes, their livelihoods. Now they face even more uncertainty.
It's a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict, a cost that echoes through generations.
It's not just about borders and armies, it's about people's lives, their hopes, their dreams.
And their resilience, their ability to keep going even in the face of unimaginable challenges.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, it's clear we're in uncharted territory here. The fall of the al-Assad regime has created a massive power vacuum, and the consequences are still unfolding.
It's a reminder that history is rarely neat and predictable.
Yeah, things can change so fast.
The carefully laid plans, the assumptions we hold, they can all be upended in an instant.
So we need to be ready to adapt, to think on our feet.
To understand the complexities, to watch closely for the key factors that will shape the future.
It's like watching a high-stakes game of chess, but no one knows what the next move will be.
And that's what makes it so fascinating and so crucial to understand.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground so far, the history, the immediate fallout, but I want to zoom out a bit now.
Okay, yeah.
The big picture stuff, like, what does this whole event tell us about power in the 21st century?
Well, I think it's a stark reminder that power, it's not this static thing.
Yeah.
It's constantly changing, morphing, responding to events.
A moving target.
Exactly. And even regimes that seem untouchable, like al-Assad's, they can be vulnerable.
Gone in a flash.
Yeah. History's full of examples like this, the Berlin Wall, the Arab Spring, now this, events that seemed impossible, suddenly reshaping the world.
Makes you wonder what other assumptions we're clinging to that might be proven wrong.
Right. It's a real wake-up call, I think, about how we think about global politics.
Like, do we need to rethink our ideas about alliances, stability, the balance of power, all that?
I think so. Yeah, we can't rely on old models anymore. The world's too fluid, too unpredictable.
The old maps don't work.
Exactly. We need new ways to navigate this constantly shifting terrain.
And that means understanding the forces that are driving these changes, right? The social, economic, political undercurrents.
Absolutely. It's not enough to just react to events. We have to understand the why, the root causes.
Go deeper.
Yeah, and recognize that power isn't just about tanks and bombs and money.
It's more than that.
It's about ideas, narratives, the ability to influence people's minds.
Hearts and minds, yeah. And that battle's playing out in the digital space too, right?
Yeah.
Social media, propaganda, this constant flood of information.
Oh, absolutely. The information landscape is more chaotic than ever.
It's overwhelming.
Trying to sift through it all, figure out what's true, what's relevant, it's exhausting.
It's like drinking from a fire hose.
And it's easy to get sucked into echo chambers where you only hear what you want to hear.
Reinforcing your own biases.
Yeah, and that's dangerous. We lose the ability to think critically, to challenge our own assumptions.
And to have meaningful conversations with people who see things differently.
Exactly. So how do we navigate this information overload? How do we stay informed without getting lost in the noise?
Good question.
Well, it takes effort, conscious effort. We have to be more discerning about the information we consume.
More selective.
Yeah, question sources, verify facts, seek out diverse perspectives, and be aware of our own biases.
Challenge ourselves.
Exactly. Don't just passively absorb whatever comes your way. Be an active participant in the information ecosystem.
A critical thinker, not just a consumer.
That's it. And remember that learning is a lifelong journey. We have to constantly be expanding our understanding of the world.
It's a process.
It is, and a fascinating one, I think.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's clear that the fall of the al-Assad regime, it's not just a regional event.
No, it's much bigger than that.
It's a global wake-up call, a reminder that the world's in constant flux.
And we need to be ready to adapt, both in our thinking and in our actions.
The old rules don't apply anymore.
Nope. Embrace the complexity, challenge your assumptions, and keep learning.
Yeah, because the future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we create.
Through our choices, our actions, our commitment to making a difference.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought. The world is changing. Are you ready to change with it?